right, good evening. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:33. And we'll start with the board norms, which are to maintain our focus, communicate respectfully, be present, keep the board productive and effective, and respect the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none, we can move to annual meeting articles, discussion and possible action. I think one thing I'd like to talk about is Article 7, setting the date as the fourth Tuesday of March. Maybe considering pushing that a little bit further out, not only with this budget year, but budget years previous. There's always late information, so I think the later we could possibly push that out, the better. I think Bob has some information about what would be an appropriate date for that, though.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you don't want to go too far because you don't want to be out past the RIF date in your contract. At least I don't think so, because if you don't have a budget at that point, you have to make some calls.
Yeah.
So having it prior, I think, is better, because even if you end up passing it, it hits a morale for riffing people that you end up recalling. Just as it's not a good look or a good feel for them. So yeah, I would say that that you probably. So I'm looking at, I'll see, I only look at April 2026, right? Is what you want me to look at.
Yeah.
And you typically do this on a Monday. So, right, or Tuesday, I'm sorry, Tuesday.
Yeah.
So Tuesday the 7th, the second Tuesday would be the 14th, which is the day before RIF date. So maybe the first Tuesday, which would be the 7th, next year would be.
Buy us a couple weeks.
Yeah, it would get you a couple weeks. Sure.
Okay.
Which, see where your things are at. Maybe you'll be, working towards one district by then. You never know.
Who knows? Yeah. 1 of 5. Any thoughts on pushing that out?
I think we are.
Disagree?
Seems beneficial.
What's that?
Seems good.
Beneficial? All right. Okay. Anybody not agree? All right. So that would be the first Tuesday of April, 2026?
So is that the vote or the meeting?
I'm sorry?
That's the meeting.
And then we,
So at the top, in the paragraph at the top, it describes where the actual vote would happen, the Australian ballots. You need to adjust it up there as well.
Ah.
So it'd be Wednesday, April 8th, right?
unless you want to have the vote before the meeting.
Well, actually, I'm sorry.
No, because,
The one up above is warning the vote this year. So,
that would stay,
um,
because I don't think we could change it for this year, right? Or
Well, if we can. Good
Article
warning,
7.
if we want to push the vote out now, we could, right? We can't change the annual meeting date, but we could push the vote out.
yeah, the annual meeting's been warned, right? That
The annual
part's been
meeting's been
happening.
warned, but we haven't warned the vote.
that's fair.
Obviously, next year we want the vote after the annual meeting.
We should shoot.
That'd be helpful, yeah.
We should shoot.
That's a good goal, yeah.
Horse before cart, cart before horse.
What do we think? Do we want to do that?
So, well, but you don't have to make that decision now, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, because I was reading it that they were together,
But they're really
different
not.
years.
Yep. So yeah, Article 7 would be the only thing you'd have to change now to move it, and then you could warn the vote when you warn the 27 meeting next year.
Yes. Great. All right. Anybody see anything else in the articles?
We'll mention Article 8 obviously doesn't have the numbers in yet because you haven't adopted a budget, but you can see, for those of you who've been on the board for a while, it does bring us back to the language that we used to use. That was part of the new bringing back in the threshold and changing the language back. It's not just a bottom line dollar amount anymore. It is the bottom line dollar amount and the per pupil and the percent higher or lower than the previous year. So Heidi will be handy with those numbers once you guys adopt the budget, whether that's today or a future day. And then that article could be updated with those numbers at the time you warn it or adopt it.
Perfect. And for moderator, we have David Lebo and clerk is, remind me.
Alenka, yep.
Alenka, and treasurer.
That would be me now.
Yep.
I was just gonna say, and you're willing to do that? All
Yeah,
right.
Lori did, I mean, unless somebody else wants to do it. I think Lori did by
Heidi, you're in.
default.
Perfect. All right, and then on, I guess the only other one, monetary value to it, Article 10. Shall the vote, yeah, we wanna transfer 100,000 of operational reserve fund to the capital
So
reserve.
that was just what you did last year, so I just left it there thinking you guys could have that conversation and see what you want
Yeah,
to do.
you wanna speak to the benefits of that?
Well, we can talk about fund balances, how about
Yeah,
that?
okay.
Okay, can I just bring that page up on my, so right now, your capital building fund, I think is gonna be expended, I don't see Greg, but if he follows through and does the items that he's planning on it, the 144,000 sitting in the capital building fund will probably be exhausted. You have 1.363 million in reserve fund right now. And you're looking at a potential surplus this year of potentially 500,000, depending on how the rest of the year goes.
Try 500,000 in.
In your current budget, you may have a surplus of close to 500,000.
Wow.
We could be conservative and say 400,000.
Okay. So you're saying that we could have potentially 1.763 million in reserve at the end of this fiscal year?
Yes.
And so the benefit to.
So, I mean, if you wanna continue with capital, right now, we don't have any money in the budget for capital moving it into the capital
Right.
fund, so I think it would be beneficial, so Greg could continue some improvements in the facilities. That would be my recommendation.
Makes sense.
And at that point, if we leave it out as a line item in the current budget, we're taking it out of reserves, we're still funding the capital projects.
Right, and
but
he
we're
can
not
come to
doing
you
it
about
with-
how he
taxpayer
suggests we
money.
spend it,
We're
absolutely.
not doing with current taxes.
Exactly,
That's
yes,
what I meant.
yes.
It's taxpayer money, it's just,
And that being said, you would take it out 150 on the line item.
Right.
If you want to make that be 150 instead of 100, that's up, whatever the dollar amount is you guys.
Right, you can have that discussion and whatever
Just a placeholder.
if you choose to do that and it's voted yes, that's what you have to work on with outside of your operational budget for
Cap.
improvements, yeah.
Okay. All right. Comfortable with 100?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you leave? Do you leave that at 100 or?
Yeah, or did you want to make it 150 to?
Should we have the whole conversation before we decide that? Do we want to have any other budgeting conversations before we decide that?
We can come back to it.
I'm just wondering if it's.
this isn't really budgeting so much,
Yeah.
it's just moving reserve money
Yeah,
around.
it's shifting on. All right, thoughts on 150?
I would urge people to really read this carefully to make sure that there are no, because there was last year's copy to make this year's, that there's no, mistakes. Everyone's kind of multiple eyes better on this one, on all the articles and the paragraph at the top as well. And maybe you guys know the hours. This is again last year's hours for voting. Maybe it's changed. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe you're aware. Maybe not. We would confirm that with the town clerks, but maybe some of you guys have ins that you know more about it.
Well, there's the information about the informational hearing on the second page. Oh, it's in both places.
Here, it's in Articles 1
Yeah,
to
the Tuesday
11
informational meeting is the interim.
Oh,
instead of 1 to 10.
what is the table on the left?
Because there's no
Come back.
I sort of, the informational hearing,
Oh,
so
yeah.
it refers to 1 to 11, as long as we're realizing it right now.
Uh-huh. First error found.
What is it? Tell me.
Informational hearing, Articles 1 through 11, should be 1 through 10.
Yeah.
On the second
Yep, right here.
page. Yeah, good call. And I would just hope that somebody's checked the link. Zoom link to.
Yeah, the link is the SU website. The top one is the Zoom.
Yeah, that's-
We'll confirm that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird. I'll just say this, like, there's a lot of people who were here, who were connected to the SU one last week. We still have no idea what happened. The link was the right link, and it wasn't a password, but normally when you post a link like that, people just click on the link and it goes right in. You don't need a password.
Right.
Can't explain why that meeting, all of a sudden there was a password required, no idea why, but we'll make sure it's all working. Like tonight, it worked fine. People got in, it was no problem. Like, I don't have any idea what the difference is. They're all set up as recurring meetings in our Zoom accounts.
Well,
So-
it hits link count, and then it stops, and you have to redo it all over again.
No, I mean, it's
Every
a,
100 or
I mean, who knows? It's a recurring link, but we will double check the
Sounds
link
good.
on this as well to make sure, for sure.
Sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
Sound like I've run into it before.
All right.
Did have a, just with regards to the warning in the articles, as far as when we should have this warned, the February 10th regular meeting would be really the end of your or now, if that's the alarm for now. But yeah, that meeting is really your window for adopting the warning and the budget, and then we would warn, I think, the week after to hit the 40 to 30 days
Okay.
target. But,
Yep.
So you have this meeting and you have the next one. So we can come back with a updated version, and maybe if the conversation you have about the budget changes any of this other stuff, we can bring that in as well.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts on the articles? No? All right. Moving on to the FY26 updated budget. What did I do? An overview?
I'll just, sure. I did send a narrative with the updated version, and I'll just say that, I went through all the recommendations or suggestions that were made at the last meeting. I sat down with Jake, about the food program and the cost of it, and we were able to slim down a lot. Summer foods and some of the budgeting that I had in there for regular supplies and food. So we were able to bring that down about 100,000, and then on top of that, since our meeting, I've met with Wardsboro and Dover, and Jake is currently doing vended meals to Wardsboro, and they love it and they want to continue. So with the cost that he is charging them, that's probably going to bring income for about $80,000 into your budget, which is going to be super helpful. What I did do, so we used some fund balances. We had said 200,000 from the food fund balance, but I reduced it to 100,000 because I am a little concerned that we might have shaved it a little bit too tight with him making the food for Wardsboro, so it would be nice to have that extra fund balance set aside. In the meantime, I also had a conversation with Dana about the Journey Away program. And so I made a notation in here that he had me remove the salary and benefits, but we have not included the fund balance of 191,000 towards this budget. The only fund balances that are in this budget that I'm presenting is 100,000 of the food program and 95,000 of the after-school fund balance. So you're only using 195,000 of the fund balances. Otherwise, we have VEMSA at a $10,000 contribution, BDCC program at 12.5, which was half of their request. I did remove the transfer of funds into the Journey Away program special fund, so that 31,000 is now back in your budget, or I should say removed from coming out of the budget. The PBL funding, they had an additional request, or the staff did, of 100,000. This board asked to keep it to 75,000, so that is in there. I did remove 150,000 of a transfer into the capital fund. I have removed the salary and benefits for one pre-K teacher and one paraeducator for a pre-K program based on the board's suggestion of removing the 3-year-old program. I did increase tuition by 40,000 for pre-K students going outside of district. And there is an increase that is a little bit for the subpay. Bob and I have had a conversation about increasing subpay because it's not very competitive in the area and we need to get more subs. So there was that. And I had, on my last narrative, I asked whether, it's time to have a conversation about whether the board's gonna continue to allow some tuitioning of Jamaica students to Wardsboro, because that's still holding a place. But after all of that and working with Jake to slim it down, we were able to reduce more and bring your the tax calculation that I put in with the,
Some of the bottom line.
yeah. So the bottom line of your expenditure budget would be $14,681,613, which is a 0.6% increase over the fiscal year 25. So I think that you've done a great job. I would make a suggestion after looking at the tax calculations. Right now, you're still over the threshold by $69 per pupil, which is pretty good. After everything that's been happening with the state and the suggestions of us being merged, I would suggest on using some general fund balance, because if it moves forward and if you become part of a larger school district, that would be absorbed by a bigger school district if you end up with fund balance. So my recommendation is to use a little bit of that to get below the threshold and to help the taxes that are impacting everybody but Jamaica the most substantially. You'll see the taxes in my tax calculator. The highest jump is Jamaica. It would be at 7.68% increase based on this budget that I've shown you, which would be $173 per $100,000 house site value. The amounts, the increases, the percentage increases average between negative for Brookline and Wyndham, who've had reappraisals, to 2.16 for Townsend and 3.80% increase over this current year's budget for Newfane.
-8 for Brooklyn.
No, -8 for Brookline, yes, -12% for Wyndham.
And this is without the use of any general funds at this
Any
point.
general fund balance, right? You're only using $195,000 between your after-school funds and some food program funding, fund balance.
Gotcha.
You have a hand up over here.
Oh. Yes, sir.
So, first of all, I just want to thank Heidi, because she's the hardest, she's like Sammy Davis Jr. was the hardest working person in show business. That's been Heidi, going through all these budgets and double checking. And of course, when you're new, you're double and triple checking your work anyways, more so than you would normally do. So, the level of detail she's been paying attention to this, I just think we owe her gratitude for getting to this place. Before we celebrate too much, I do want to throw a little bit of a curveball out there for you guys. So it was reported to me by the staff at JVS that the day after the vote, that the parents who were dropping off kids for the pre-K were very excited that they believed that what that meant was that the pre-K would continue to operate at JVS next year. So there's been no conversation about that yet. But one of the things that needs to be talked about is if you eliminate 3-year-olds, you're going from 2 classrooms to 1 classroom in pre-K. Currently you have 1 Townsend and 1 Jamaica. If you go to 1 classroom, and if the assumption is you're keeping it at Jamaica, if that's the assumption, yes, Townsend gains some extra space to play around with a little bit. But I suspect that you will drop numbers for the Newfane and Townsend residents that don't necessarily want to go out to Jamaica for pre-K. So you could end up losing some revenue potentially and paying out money to go for kids to go to more private stuff, more private pre-K. If you keep it in Townsend, those numbers maybe hold steady. Maybe you get some of the Jamaica kids, maybe you don't. But then you have to figure out what you're putting at JVS to meet the needs of the voters. And how are the people in Jamaica going to feel about it if it's not pre-K? So while we have a net savings of about 120 by shutting down the 3-year-olds,
Yeah.
1 classroom, my suggestion would be, if you're thinking about following Heidi's advice, which is to maybe consider some more of the general fund balance, that maybe you don't eliminate the 3-year-old program and keep a classroom at JVS. Now, I will tell you, the administration has met, the principals and Stephanie and Jen and Heidi have all met at the end of last week to talk about if the board does pull the plug on the 3-year-olds, and if Townsend is a site where the pre-K room is located, what else could we do? And we have talked about a number of different concepts, and Stephanie is exploring some collaborations with BRSU around some special education programming, moving some existing stuff that we have here to there for special education programming. We even had a very brief conversation about the immersion center and how let's rethink that, and is there a way to kind of bring that back? That one would cost more money because you'd have to figure out a way to have someone run it, in essence, to bring the kids out there for their residencies, or however you want to call it. At any rate, I just want you guys to have that in your head, because while this is very good and it's very close, I don't know that you're quite done. And I just want you to have that conversation as what do you think is the best option for existing in JVS in the building? And then if it's pre-K, then how does that, are you bringing back the 3-year-olds or not? So I don't have an opinion per se, just something I want you guys to think about, but I do know that it was shared with me that the parents were very, oh yeah, that means pre-K's here next year. It was almost like a foregone conclusion to those parents. So they didn't know at that point you were talking about the 3-year-olds not happening. So that would change everything.
Is now an appropriate time to hear those other possible recommendations so we can
Well, we don't have
discussion with?
We talked about this last Friday for the first time. So we're like very early stages of talking about it, but there's nothing that I would feel comfortable putting out there in the public yet without further conversation internally around it. Just because there's people involved,
Of course.
and they haven't been notified. I just don't want to put stuff out there publicly. at this
I just
point.
feel like I don't know how we would make a budgeting decision about whether it's the right thing to do or not without having an understanding of basic feasibility of other things.
So if it's an existing program, then it wouldn't necessarily have any additional cost because you're already doing it here. Although if it's a program that involves kids needing to be here for mainstream courses, for example, for part of the day, then you'd have to figure out some transportation, so there would be some increased cost for that. The immersion center, as I said, I think if you're going to really jump into that, you need a director that we don't have to really structure that and work with the teachers on planning that and lesson planning that. It's really unthought of. We talked about if that was something the board wanted to consider, we would recommend getting some teachers in a room to talk about, the elementary teachers and middle school teachers, how we would use that, what it looked like. And then propose something later, but we're not, it's, again, just literally spitballing. If it's the pre-K staying there, then obviously it's the same cost. You're putting that 120 basically back in, and there's no additional cost because you already know what that is. It's a set number. So I know it doesn't really answer the exact detail of what you're looking for, but I just feel it's premature. We literally just talked about this last Friday, and there was no that would be awesome moment. There was a lot of yeah, maybe. But if we did this, it could maybe there was a lot of that. There was a lot of agreement that the site and the location next to the park is so many opportunities for that, and partnerships with even the state park themselves, trail building.
Awesome.
We talked about a lot of things. We haven't talked to the state park. We haven't, there's, and so I just think there's Jambo was mentioned. Maybe there's partnerships there. The bike shop. There's just things. There's a lot of spitballs, but no other people were brought into the loop on that, and so it just feels weird to throw too much out there. But
And can I just, as a follow-up to that, what do we have to provide? Just educational services, direct educational services is the wording, right?
Yep.
But there's no is there a definition somewhere of direct educational services? Is it it has to be this number of days or this percentage of time or?
Nope.
So theoretically, best case scenario would be all day, every day, all the things, and worst case scenario would be we did a thing one time, and that all falls under that definition?
If
just-
the town didn't think that we were meeting the spirit of it, they could make an argument that we weren't meeting the spirit of it, we'd have to figure out.
For sure.
And so maybe it wouldn't be us defining that. Maybe it's a courtroom being like, I don't know. I mean, how far down that road you want to go?
I mean, I'm definitely not suggesting we do a one-time thing. That's not my
Right.
suggestion at all. I just want everybody in Jamaica. I'm not saying that. I just want to be like clear of whether or not we have some sort of definition to work with. I
No
feel like
definition.
a little.
Direct educational services to kids is basically how it's phrased. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna suggest, why don't we just go with what we had and not complicate our lives right now?
3, 4, 3, 5.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the same thing. It's the lowest hanging fruit. We know what it costs. We did it before. It's already an expectation that's been voiced, and we've gotten so close without using any of that fund balance, and given the instability and the unknown going on, we might as well spend a little fund balance to do the things we need to do, get this done this year, because we know changes are coming now.
Just looking at the revenue section, could you explain what the increase in tuition is? Looks like we're
Yep, so the 10 Wyndham kids that have been coming to Townsend in 6th grade, they weren't budgeted in because that whole thing with with Wyndham closing happened after the fiscal year 25 budget. So that's an increase. I have budgeted 10 Wyndham kids based on what I see from this current year to next year, and I have 20 Leland and grade tuition kids based on what the current year is at the increased rate that was approved by the board for tuition rates for next year.
So we have 20 tuition kids at the grade now.
Yes. Well, and yes, there's some graduating, but Wardsboro and Dover, I checked in with them and they're expecting a few kids, so I counted that.
I'm just curious, why is the actual only 10,000? Can we not make them pay us for the
It's
students?
so the actual is when I pulled this a long time ago, when we started looking at this. So the tuition bills went out and hadn't gotten paid. So this hasn't been updated with actual numbers
Oh,
since
so the actuals aren't actuals.
the actuals are not. They were actuals when I pulled all this information in the end of November, but before tuition bills got paid.
But FY24 actuals would be real.
Yes. But that was also before Wyndham.
Right.
Thank you.
Would you like the actuals? Because I can go in and.
Thank you.
All right. Other thoughts on, go ahead.
On the preschool, I think I'm with everybody so far. I think that we leave preschool alone. I am concerned that we did have to hire a para for Townsend this year because of the challenges in that room with the 2 grades, and I know we did not put that in the budget.
It's not in the budget.
Do we anticipate needing someone to change diapers in Townsend again next year if we keep 3-year-olds there?
And you want to give the short version of what that person's doing and then maybe speak to that based on what you're doing?
So the para that we added was to add additional support in pre-K and in 1st grade. So it was a combination of to provide support across those 2 classes. And so and it wasn't primarily to change diapers.
That was the part that stuck in my head from your
Right. So it was, and I can
I'll be
understand
honest,
why.
that was what stuck.
that does stick in one's mind, yeah. But it wasn't primarily for that. But there were extraordinary needs, which included additional children who were not potty trained, yes. But there were other extensive needs beyond just that necessitated that need this year. So, although I can't predict the future, I would say that this was, the extraordinary circumstance that brought that to you this year.
So was that a you don't think you need it next year?
As I said, I don't have a crystal ball. That's, if anyone else has one I can borrow, I do my best to try to predict the future, but I can, tell you that those were those extraordinary circumstances this year about that pre-K class and that grade 1 cohort that I described when I made that proposal that necessitated that for this year.
So Drew, I think your point is that we are doing it this year, why not account for it next year if we
Well, if
think
you
that it's
think
a
it's gonna be
possibility?
there, because I'm assuming those students are staying, right?
Right. If it
Those
was
3-year-olds are gonna be 4-year-olds and the 4-year-olds are gonna be.
first grader, yeah.
Yeah, so
Right.
I'm guessing these children aren't going anywhere. So,
I like your line of thinking, just
cause the conversation around going from 3 and 4 to just 3 was simplifying, making the teacher's life easier around teaching one age group of children, a little smaller class size maybe. But if we're not going to make those changes, I don't wanna get asked again halfway through the year or quarterly through the year to add staff.
yeah,
If
before
you're-
you- So how much is that?
I'm sorry, I missed,
The addition of
the para
Last year.
for this year
Yeah.
was under 30,000, it was probably more like 23,000.
But that was
What would
partial
it be?
year.
It was a partial year.
Full
right, so
year,
full year.
next year.
A full year would be around 30, 35, depending on
Okay.
what level they came in at. With benefits.
Plus
Yeah, mouse. Okay.
I wanna make sure that we actually have the conversation of if we're gonna have, if we eliminated 3-year-olds, we could get by with 1 classroom. We are saying maybe we don't want to get by with 1 classroom. Does that mean we also want 3-year-olds? I guess is the question. Then I wanna just make sure we have that conversation.
I think what we're saying is if you have a pre-K without 3-year-olds,
You
it would
can-
be Jamaica.
Well,
Or some other-
so originally we said we could take away, if we took away 3-year-old pre-K, we could have 1 classroom. That was the original conversation.
Right.
Then we said, okay, well, maybe based on all of these circumstances, it is good for everybody to have 2 classrooms. So if we're talking about now having 2 classrooms, I just wanna make sure that we've had the conversation about whether we still want just 4-year-olds or we want 3 and 4-year-olds in 2 places.
They are different questions.
Those are 2 different questions, and I just wanna make sure we talk about both of them. I don't have strong opinions on it, but I know that we just sort of glazed over it and nobody said anything about it, and I don't feel like that's
So you're talking about 2 classrooms of just 4-year-olds.
correct. Or maybe a 3 and a 4, like, right, if we're gonna, let's just talk about what that looks like and how, I know it doesn't change the budgeting question that much necessarily, so maybe it doesn't necessarily need to happen right now. But I feel like we glazed over it, and I just wanna make sure that we've actually thought through the possibilities of, and implications.
Offered 3-year-olds in Jamaica and 4-year-olds in town.
Right, I'm just wondering if we get more, if we do it one way or the other, I don't know, it might change your
Yeah,
budget.
just go ahead.
So I'm just concerned, I don't know really the numbers of incoming 3-year-olds.
Right.
And what we do know is the 3-year-olds becoming 4-year-olds. I can say from knowing some of the pre-K regulations in the past that it's really hard to have 1 person in a classroom with pre-K kids, right? And so you're looking at staffing a teacher and a para. So because of that, if you're looking at cost efficiencies, cutting out 3-year-olds may feel like you're overspending in your pre-K classrooms. Because you probably wouldn't cut the para out of with the pre-K, especially in Jamaica, for instance. Like, you're not gonna
It doesn't
leave
save you
that
any staff.
person. Exactly. Technically, you need a teacher for 10 kids, and if you're under 10, for instance, in Jamaica, there is less than 10 students. So technically, Kathy could be there by herself. That would not be a safe thing, nor is it easy to handle 3 and 4-year-olds by yourself. So I think logistically and financially, you're hurting yourself if you're having 2 classrooms and you're cutting out 3-year-olds. Does that make sense, my answer?
Losing the revenue.
You're
On top of it.
you're still gonna have the same revenue because your 3-year-olds can get outside placements and you're gonna count them. You're paying which I guess you wouldn't be paying, but you're still getting the revenue, so,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, so you're covering
You have
that
additional
expense.
expenses, same revenue.
Right.
Gotcha.
So logistically and financially, the best is to have 3-4 in each location.
At least at one location, at least at one location.
Yeah, if you're talking about having two
Yeah.
classrooms, you're gonna get the most kids in two locations if they're mixed grades. It might not be the ideal situation for those teachers with 3 and 4-year-olds mixed,
Yeah.
but that's where you're gonna get the biggest bang for your buck
Mm.
in efficiency and your most number of kids probably.
And in terms of the academic question, as in like preparedness of 4-year-olds to enter kindergarten, are we
Different
talking,
question.
right, so third
question.
question
Yeah.
is, what is, as administrators
Yeah.
and people who understand how kids learn, I would love to know your opinions on best preparedness. Is it best to have a mixed or
So
individual?
the only thing I can say to that is that in River Valleys, at Dover and Wardsboro, maybe Marlboro too, I'm not sure how Marlboro's.
Oh, there's a full day, I think
They're
now.
both,
It's just
okay.
Wardsboro.
Wardsboro and Dover has 4 and 3 in one room. Each of them have them in one room, but the 3-year-olds are not full day. So parents have to come pick up midday, and it might not even be 5 days.
No, it's not, at least in Wardsboro, it's only 3 days, it's a 10 hours.
So they give them the
They do
10
10
hours, and that gives, what that does educationally is it gives the teacher the afternoon with the 4-year-olds. When the 3-year-olds aren't there, you don't have to worry about napping as much and fewer diapers to change, whatever. But you have that extra, more academic, I'm not saying academic, more academic time with the 4-year-olds. So that is one thing that they do. It doesn't change, you don't have a reduction in staff as a result of that.
Right,
They're getting their 10 hours
Right.
either way. You're just not offering the service to the families for the 3-year-olds beyond those 10 hours. Or it could be a half hour half a day every day if you chose to do that. So those are a couple different options to give those 4-year-olds a little bit more academic time if you had a mixed class.
And the way we currently offer it with
It's
3-year-olds.
full for both.
It's full day
Yeah.
for both.
I mean, you can also put restrictions on the amount of, so with two staff, you can have 20 kids, but you could also make a decision to reduce the amount that's the best optimal size. I mean, you could make that choice, or the principal could, as to the optimal size of the class. It might be less than 20 if you've got a lot of 3-year-olds. Just throwing that out there.
Does any of that, do those questions change the budget numbers? So we can have that full conversation.
Unless you're adding the staff, going back to the question originally to Randy, unless you're putting that staff number back in. That's the only thing that's changing the budget numbers at this point.
Not
That
back
staff
in,
member was,
never in.
Not added.
no, I'm saying, so
I'm
that was
sorry.
bringing us from a teacher in 1 bearer to a teacher in 2 bearers?
Well, there's 2 parts. Part 1 is if you're putting the 3-year-olds back in and you're operating 2 different rooms, then you're putting a teacher and a para back in the budget based on what she's presented today. And your question to Randy is maybe now a 3rd body being added.
So we had 2 before we had the request,
We had a
right?
teacher and a para.
The teacher bearer, now we have a teacher and 2 bearers that is split between pre-K and 1.
We have a teacher and a para at Townsend. You're talking about a teacher and a para at Jamaica. And then there is this other para that was added this year.
That's
At
half-time in
Townsend.
pre-K.
Yeah.
That is partly in pre-K, partly in first grade.
A 1.5
That you are, it sounds like you are suggesting gets added into the budget for next year, which I think is a great idea. Drew, thank you.
No, I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to.
No, I
sit
think
here
you
in
can
the
just stop right where.
Because
I think everybody should vote before you say anything else.
Well, I've got more things to say. But if we are going to, if that's something we're going to need, because the students are going to need it, then we should have that conversation now. versus-
Versus next year in the middle of the year, right? And
It'd be
be
easier to
proactive
staff
rather
and,
than reactive.
So,
Agreed. And so the net result, if we were to do that, Jamaica and Townsend, both 3-4, is 120, right? The net.
Right,
And if we were to add the additional staff that we just talked about, full year would be another 30, so we're talking 150.
Plus benefits though.
150, right?
Yeah, I
Did you
would-
say 30, 35?
You're probably looking at maybe closer to 40 if they took health insurance.
Okay, so
Yeah.
160
Yes,
for the
yes.
addition of 3, 4, or sorry,
With
the addition of 3-year-olds.
If you added a para back for
Yeah.
additional, yeah.
Okay.
Or a para in that wasn't there.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I believe Newbrook also requested a part-time para at the same time, which is also granted. So I think if we're considering adding the one for Townsend as full-time next year, we should talk to Scotty about if he feels he would need the para he requested next year as well.
Our request is kind of different. Our request was really based upon some changes over the last 2 years in staffing. And then we had a staff member leave in the middle of this year, and we had somebody new come on. And there was, right now, we're operating really, really well. We hired an incredible person for that. And I really appreciate you guys allowing me to do that for this year. I think that we'll be able, I'm not making a request for that for next year. I'm not, right now, I feel like we're overcoming a problem, and the kids are responding very well.
Yeah.
And that's what the intent was it was really a temporary thing. And I'd never come to you guys for something like that before, so I appreciate you letting me experiment. I think that it worked. Or I shouldn't say that. I think that it's working. But I still have another 4 months left. We still have another 4 months left of this, and I think that I think if anything else comes out, it's going to really be around an IEP, a specific IEP, and that's not something we need to budget for. That would be something that will go through the special ed department.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Do we need an administrative assistant at the Jamaica one, or just the teacher and the para dealing with that?
So that's a great question. I think the administrative assistant there is definitely not as busy as one of the elementary schools for sure. I think that it's, despite the fact that there's under 10 kids and you only need one adult in the room from a legal standpoint, the para is helpful there.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's times where one of those two people is out and there's no sub availability, I mean, it's often good to have another set of hands, someone to answer the phone, do the doorbell. There's some pre-K paperwork and shuffling that has to happen that person is assisting with as well. So, like, in an ideal world, no, but it's just a tough one. They're in a building they're by themselves in this building, and it's not a big expense for a little extra peace of mind for the staff and probably for the families. The things that they do, pushing out weekly newsletters and things like that to keep families in the loop, like someone would have to do that. So yeah, you could maybe stipend the teacher or the para to maybe jump in and do some of that work instead and save a few bucks. I don't know. I don't know this. I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be set up so that the extra person, depending on the numbers in the classroom, handled some of that.
Yep. And we could set up the
Like the
doorbell
phone
to be
ringing.
in the classroom from the front door, and
Camera.
the phones and the camera bank. Like we could make it better.
Could you get a part-time administrator, like 2 days a week, 3 days a week? I mean,
We could do whatever you guys would like us to do. Yes. I mean, I think a part-time would be better than none
yeah,
for sure,
better than
because
none.
there are things that need to get done.
Mhm. But it's harder to get part-time than it is full.
Maybe you find someone who's looking. I mean, it's a crapshoot, really.
Yeah.
It's a crapshoot for that type of work. Some people maybe would like the part-time.
Part-time's not benefits. Is it?
No, well, it's gonna be 32 hours to get that.
Yes. So that's a possibility.
You're
Yeah.
probably looking at a similar cost. They usually make a little bit more than paras make. I think that's what you're looking at before. Yeah.
I'm just curious if there were ever a time, or has been a time where, say, the one of those two staffs at Jamaica is out and they need another person to be there. Is there any possibility of any other of our staff, we have lots and lots of staff, and I know that that's not their job, but I'm wondering if there's any possibility of a person going there for a day in an emergency. Is
So-
there people that have that availability?
One of the wrinkles is that you have to be pre-K
Oh, right, yeah.
endorsed or
Thank you.
whatever, not certified like a teacher, but you have to have that multiple extra background checks and all that stuff, and so not everybody has that.
Fair.
In fact, really just the people that are touching the pre-K room in Townsend have it. So it's a very small group of people. And the admin assistant there does have it, so she can go into the room currently.
Makes sense.
Can you remind me, if we think enrollment, if we have 3 and 4, if we think that's gonna be consistent next year? We have a beat on that
The numbers, consistent numbers, is that what you mean?
of students.
I don't know if you have a feel for that thing.
The trick is knowing about 3-year-olds.
Yeah, I don't know if we know that at all, but
That's
thinking about
always,
this.
I've gotten some, and I think I think that we have some census information and things like that at the district level that can tell us we know the 3-year-olds who are currently here, and so I think that it's probably going to be about the same, but it's hard to predict those 3-year-olds, and so that's what's always the tricky one. But in terms of the 4-year-olds, given and then there's also not knowing if there will be 3-year-olds who are currently. Sometimes we have 3-year-olds who are currently in private preschools who then come to us as 4-year-olds, or 3-year-olds who are currently in daycares who come to us, or sometimes they stay where they are. So it's hard to know what the movement is within current placements.
Yeah, I was just looking at the, remember we had the NASDAQ projections done for long-term planning. And so I've just pulled up the projected enrollments. So school year 25-26, the projection is 49 total pre-K students, which is I think it's combined, because that seems high.
And that's all
But-
towns.
Well, that might be all pre-K kids, all towns, yeah, but all pre-K kids, including ones that maybe go privately.
Yeah.
So,
Go to Timpson, go to Sunday.
and then actually, there's projections that show that going up into the low 50s and even the mid 50s out 5 years. So somehow when they research the birth
Somebody's
rates,
having kids.
there's a little mini boom coming maybe, but very mini. So anyways, that's what they had for projections in this thing.
But not going down, which is.
Doesn't look
That
like
part,
it.
no, but again, it doesn't mean they're coming to us for pre-K.
So if people know that we're running it and it's consistent, maybe,
Yep.
we'll get around.
A lot of pre-K choices in my experience are made less programmatically and more like geographically. Where you're actually going for work or where you're going during the day really matters to someone who has a 3-year-old, and a lot of choices are made that way, I think.
Lindsay, do we get to your 3 questions?
I think so.
All right, so what are your thoughts on that for next year? Yes, 3-4, yes, 3-4, add the extra position, 260,000.
I would personally be inclined to say yes to 3 and 4, but no to the extra position that we don't think is probably needed, and hope that that's real.
Can I ask our educators and experts if we can do it safely and comfortably for everyone without that? I am all for saving everything we can, but if we're gonna do it, I wanna make sure that I don't wanna undermine what we're doing by having it be riskier, having our staff feel overburdened.
Good question.
I'm
We're
looking forward to
asking
Randy on
the
this.
year.
Yeah.
And I know you don't have a crystal ball.
I don't have a crystal ball. I think that one of the concerns about having a large mixed pre-K class is that you have 2 adults and a group of 20, 20 3 and 4 year olds who have very different needs. And I say 3 and 4 year olds, but we really have 3, 4, and 5 year olds there. And developmentally, they look more like 2, 3, 4, 5 year olds, right? Some of them have lagging skills and are developmentally at different places. So that is a challenge, and it's a challenge that we'll always be faced with. Bob mentioned we could put a cap, right? That is an option that we have. We could put a cap and we could say, no, we're only going to have 15 kids in our class. We're only going to have 12 kids in our class. There's only, at the most they've had in Jamaica, they've had 9 kids registered. We could say we'll only have 9 kids in Townsend with the same amount of staff. That's not very welcoming to our community. It's not really a service to our community.
I don't think we're in a position to
right.
cap.
I don't, and we also, that's not really what public school is really about. This past week we registered the 20th student to come. As it turned out, they decided not to come, but we were going to have our 20th. That would have been our cap, right? And we were registering them because we could, right? It felt hard to do that, knowing the pressures that even with 3 adults, the pressures that we feel in the class, but we know that we can, legally take 20, so we're gonna take 20. So it is hard. It's hard to do that. And I don't know what the numbers are gonna look like next year, right? I just saw that, right now, the makeup of our classroom is 12 4-year-olds, 7 3-year-olds. So, those 7 3-year-olds move up. We'll have however many other 4-year-olds will join them. How many 3-year-olds are in the offing, we don't know. And the issues or the challenges that we've been facing in our 1st grade class, hopefully, we'll get a handle on those, but those students are going to be 2nd graders next year. Right, they're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to support them. We're going to continue to try to help them become better citizens and better students. But those challenges are still going to be there. Like I said, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict what it's going to be. I would like to tell you that I'm not going to have to come back and ask and say that we're going to need more support. But like we've talked about here many times, the challenges and the supports that our kids need these days, it's different than it was when we were kids, and so I can't predict what it's going to be. I do know that when you have a large pre-K class that is mixed, that's one of the dynamics that is a little bit different than what we've had at Townsend in the past. When we've had a dedicated 3-year-old class and a dedicated 4-year-old class, it is a different scenario, right? The mixed age does add another variable to it. So
Let me ask this, Randy,
Sure.
since you don't have a crystal ball. Would we
I
rather
did say
just,
that a few times.
You
that I
did.
don't have a crystal
would
ball.
we rather just build it in and save Randy having to come back halfway through the year and ask for it? And if he doesn't need it, if we build it in, then
Surplus.
it's a savings, it's a surplus. Just bank it at the end of the year.
Right now, let me just say this.
Yeah.
Fred, at this point, let's say this. At this point, we have hired someone through this year. It is a position they were hired through this year. It's not a hire that is to continue. And so you have to do your budget for now. We can do this for now and then make that decision for the next year when that time comes. But you can do your budget as if you want to plan for it, and then we can make the decision about whether it's necessary or not, maybe once we see what the preschool enrollment really actually looks like. And there are also some things, potential changes in that first grade cohort, and some additional supports that may be coming for some students in that first grade cohort that might change the dynamics, and so it might change the need. I'm not sure. So things may begin to look different for things, and so maybe we revisit it, but maybe you plan and then you, like you said, maybe have savings.
Yeah, the other thing I was gonna suggest is that if you leave it out for now, then just thinking about what she just projected for your surplus this year, to find 30 somewhere in a surplus that could be potential next year as well. I mean, there's always fluctuations, but it's not big money from your total budget that you could add at another point later without it being as disruptive, maybe. And just go now with just the teacher and the pair to put the 3-year-olds
Right,
back.
if
see
you were
what
to,
happens.
if you were to deficit spend, it would go into your fund balance.
Yeah.
Like it would,
I thought,
yeah,
are we allowed to
Yeah.
deficit spend?
are allowed to
So
deficit
if
spend.
we had an emergency,
You could revisit it and make a decision to deficit spend.
You want a motion vote on that.
Yeah.
And I also think that the decision around how you do 3-year-olds, like if we're hearing that the mix creates challenge, and maybe going back to Lindsay's question about the academic element of it, that maybe there's a conversation that we have administratively first, and we come with a pitch to you about 3-year-olds, how that could look different next year. That could be a separate thing. It's not going to have budgetary implications, but it gives us some time to kind of process that. We don't know who the families are yet, so there's no one being personally affected by it yet to make a decision in the spring. But that could be something we could talk about too to help alleviate the afternoons as well. So just keep that in the back of your minds.
Okay. 120 then? Good. Okay.
it's 120 to have the preschool back in.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the
And did
3-year-olds.
we back out, was that the net?
That's
Taking out
the
the
net right
additional
there.
tuition and all of that?
So taking it all out was about 164,000. I put back in 45,000 for tuition, so, yeah.
Okay.
So Heidi's gonna redo a magic number here on the spot and can tell you where we are with the threshold. Yeah, what the bottom line percentage increase is on the expenditure budget at the same time, right? Or is
Yeah.
that one more complicated, or?
No, so I'm increasing it by 120,000. It takes the threshold, you're 211.82 over the threshold, but I was doing some calculations before and I'm thinking that, okay, it's gonna be just over 150 right now.
How about while you're doing that, we won't put you on the spot. We want to kind of go down through the list, the laundry list of changes to the budget. Still keeping JVS building. Already kind of said that. But I'm gonna speak to that. So
Yeah, the next two actually, I've been thinking about it and I think that, cutting those in half just seems like, form over function. We're not saving that much money. We're talking about $22,500 in a $14 million budget for programs that actually touch lives. I mean, before the meeting, you were talking about VEMSA graduates who have saved 2 lives. Where do you get the bang for that buck? I think we should put that money back. I think we should use fund balance or whatever. Those are academic programs that affect our students in different ways than you're just sitting in a classroom learning. You're going out there, you're touching these kids in a different way. It's alternative education in a way. And I think those are important things to do. We've been with BDCC for over 10 years. Started with Leland and Gray before we were one big district. And, at graduation, they're giving a scholarship and funding the kid who wrote the best business plan to go out and start their own business. And then, so they graduate from high school with, this fledgling business and money to fund it. Again, an incredible educational opportunity. And, for $12,500, we can continue to give that to these kids. So I think those are tiny little things to put back, but they're very important because of the impacts they have.
Can somebody remind me, cause that it says reduced VEMSA to 10, so from what?
20.
10 from 20?
Yeah.
And both of those were halved, so the 12.5 was also 25?
25,
Okay,
yeah.
I wasn't sure if they were halved
Mhm.
evenly or if it was
They
some
were.
other random number. I didn't remember that.
If you put all of that back in, you're looking at using fund balance of 201,000 to get under the threshold.
Including VEMSA and.
Including the pre-K program, VEMSA and BDCC, adding, which essentially is 142,500.
We're using $211,000 of fund balance.
201,000.
201,000. And our anticipated fund balance with this year's surplus is 1.7.
Potential,
So we would still have $1.5 million sitting in fund balance.
yes.
It's kind of a no.
Less if you move some to capital, so, yes. So, and you
Well,
could choose to spend more of it to help Jamaica's taxes, which, you could choose to spend 300,000.
Do we have any idea how again, it's today and it's just, one speech, but supposedly the governor's gonna use 77 million to buy down the tax rate?
That has been being talked about for a while.
What will that do to us?
It's hard to know how it's going to impact it. It sounds like it's kind of across the board, what he put out to business managers before this public meeting was if everybody can stay below, or maybe it was part of Zoe's, I don't remember if it was part of her speech, but if everybody stays below the 5 or 6% increase for taxes, that he was going to use this money to relieve all taxpayers. But I don't know, nobody knows what it's gonna look like on a per town basis.
So it's not gonna change our calculus and tax rates or anything like that?
No,
We do
it's
what
gonna
we
be
do,
on top
And then it's
of-
on top of that,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
That's
Yes.
So then we would still have 1.5 left after buying down the debt. We could even talk about, moving the articles say 150, we could move that 150 and, to help Jamaica, we could put a little more fund balance in there and try and reduce their taxes some more.
Could do that.
I mean, if we came out of this budget season with $1 million surplus still, I think that's
I
responsible.
mean, if you're gonna lose it in the long run, and I do think it's the long run, I don't think this is gonna happen in 3 or 4 years. So you wouldn't wanna use all of it, but you
No.
are giving it back to the taxpayers at a time when they need it. And I think Jamaica needs it as well as everybody else. So again, it's a board discussion, but I think it's a fair discussion to have at this point in time, while details of the plan
So
get
this
figured
is,
out.
this updated number is with that,
It's with
201.
300, it's with 300, I wanted to see what it would do.
so with 300,000 fund balance, Jamaica's is under 6%, 597.
Right, but I mean, if we
Percentages.
spend down to $1 million.
Which is 134
Which is
potential
about
dollars
5 to
per
10%.
$100,000.
So it's a half, it gives the bigger tax break to Jamaica.
Yeah.
It gets our students what they need, and it's kind of a prudent position to be in, given the turmoil in funding an education district.
Going down the list of the changes for budget, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that's you would like to? I'm sorry, I'm not sure it's first. Sorry.
Given the size of our fund balance, I really think we should put back the PBL and the after-school funding that both been reduced to the full requested amounts. They're both key programs that I think are really important, and if we're talking about the importance of VEMSA and BDCC, I think those are equally important, and it would be really valuable and important to restore both of those as well.
So you wanted to speak to the line, or you're looking at the line?
Oh, yeah, I'm
Yes,
talking
go ahead.
about, so PBL was decreased by 25,000, so putting that back up to the full 100,000. And after school funding was decreased by 100,000, so putting that back up to the full request, which was 400,000.
I agree with your increase in PBL, but I disagree with the after school I think that program needs to be scrutinized. That's not in our core mission. That's not an academic program. It is enrichment. It is important, but it is social service. It needs to be scrutinized and it needs to be run super efficiently. And when we talked about getting paid, getting some kind of pay for that service, you're putting your kid in after school daycare. You're paying daycare. This is free after school care for your kid that we're running. And when we talked about subsidizing it with payment, it's like, oh, they won't pay. Like, well, we're making all our taxpayers pay and we're not even giving them a choice. So I think we really need to look hard at that one. But I agree with the other one. That's an academic program. We should definitely fund that. And again, it's peanuts. 25,000 is.
Go ahead, Sarah.
No, I just, I disagree about the value of the after school. I think it's really an extension of the school day. There is enrichment, like you said, but there's also academic value to what's provided there. And there's actually a lot of research about, Jamie's already spoken to it, so I don't know if I need to repeat
So
it.
there's like a curriculum and the curriculum coordinators involved and there are actually teachers doing it?
No, not to that level, no. But I feel there's research that shows the value of after school programming and the effect it has on kids in their school day. The positive effects.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna echo and agree with Sarah on this one. I think I don't think you can parse too finely what happens at what time of day is social services versus academic, and we're talking a lot about the needs of our students and also their families in our community, and whether that means people can work full days, whether kids are getting support or other opportunities. I think we can still ask Jamie to continue to track this by whether we keep looking for grant funding, whether we keep developing the programs or the summer program to make sure that we're squeezing them and really getting a great value for everyone. But I think it's worth thinking about our needs and our mission aren't just 8 months a year from 9 to 3. It's part of a bigger picture, and I think we should consider it that way.
Thanks, Kate. True.
Do we feel like the services we're providing now are inadequate? Because this is a 25% increase in services next year over what we're doing this year. So it's not like we're taking anything away, the way I read this, right? We're just level funding. So this is not really a reduction, it is maintaining, by removing the 100,000, we're maintaining the program that we're currently running. We're just not expanding services by 25%.
Right, there's a couple programs I think Jamie presented that he wanted to add. And so, but we haven't dictated what he can use the money for. We've just told Jamie that 300,000, and I know he's actively looking for grants. We've been working on one together. Where federal money goes from here on out is questionable, but no, I think Jamie, you may drop Fridays, or there's some thoughts about it, but I think that 300,000 you came to was adequate.
Yeah, it was definitely adequate. We're running off of 375 this year, and that didn't include summer because we had summer. I was able to work with the budget, and that 400,000 included summer, included extra summer program, and it actually, built in some funds to expand and start looking at doing things for high school students as well.
So we can
we
definitely
can work with
continue
that.
with the elementary kids.
Yeah.
So I actually really appreciate what Sarah brought up. I think that there is tremendous value there. I understand that it's not teachers sitting in front of kids lecturing at them, but I think that there's a huge value in it regardless. That being said, I do think level funding makes sense and not increasing funding at this time. So I just want to put that out there. I think it's a really important program.
Sorry, I don't want to miss, who do we have out there? I see Paul.
Peter's there too.
Here. Okay, I just want to make sure.
No hands, right?
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I think Dana was before me.
I
The bottom line, will we continue to tuition kids to Wardsboro?
Thank you for.
We gotta solve that.
Yeah, but do we wanna settle the PBL and after school, but I totally agree.
Yeah.
We need to do that, yeah.
Didn't wanna lose that
No,
lead, so.
no. Go ahead, Scott.
You guys know that I have kind of an inside scoop around PBL and what I see happening there, and it seems to me that one of the ways that Leland and Gray is distinguished, is this new programming, right? And the extent that it's universal and that it's choice based, and that and that it really draws a lot of families into the meetings have been really attended. It's people are interested in the work. And I think, I also have been sitting here this whole time. I'm sure Randy feels the same way. We've been sitting here and we've been cutting and cutting, but it really hasn't been, it's been more focused on the older kids. And what we're cutting, it seemed to me, more focused on them. So when I hear Sarah bring that up about PBL, it really makes sense to me just as a person. I mean, I should be, I guess, advocating for my K-5, but I really feel that as a person, it really makes sense as a distinguished program at the school and a new budding thing that we don't want to like let the air out of before we really get it rolling. And it's really getting rolling. I mean, the teachers are bought in and it's like a thing and people are excited and the kids are excited. So I don't know if any of you saw the offering, that video, the full offering. It was really, I mean, it's very diverse and very cool, and it was all homespun. All the teachers came up with their activities. So I don't know. I think that that really maybe considering that makes sense to me, just because we have cut a lot from up here, and boy, that program, sure, to give it a chance to really take hold. I mean, I worry a lot about like this 5-year, what's going to be happening when, but when we think about the kids we have right now, what can we do to make things really special for them? And I think that those offerings are really special and that kids are excited about them.
I think that it, at least reading tea leaves, it sounded like we were all in agreement on the PBL. I don't think anybody disagreed on the 75 to 100. It was more, I think we were split on the.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, on the after school, right? We had some yes, some no. Which is,
Well, I mean, just doing some quick, numbers here and looking at everything. Our Fridays right now are low, and that would be an easy fix to just offer 4 days a week. And traditionally, from what I heard, that's what used to happen anyway. I could even take around 370,000 if we cut that Friday, which would actually put us less than what we're at right now currently, and that would cover after school, summer, the expanded program.
You said 370, did you mean 270? Because they've already reduced you from 400 to 300.
Yeah, but I'm saying this current, our current budget this year was
Yes.
375.
Yes.
So I'm saying, even down to 370, we can run a very successful program.
one day would equate to how much? I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Just ballpark.
Hold on one second. I mean, you're looking at almost 35,000, cutting just that one day, and still keeping 4 weeks of summer, and then that extra, that career exploration, and that's not to mention any grants that we get in as well to help cover some of the costs.
So, am I understanding you correctly, the level funding would actually be, without Fridays, would actually be 370? Or
Yeah.
that's with the expansion to middle school and high school?
That's with the expansion to high school and doing that career college summer week.
The numbers don't add up to what we discussed in our budget. It's something, I'm missing something. Wasn't the budget last year 300,000 with a $100,000 increase, make it 400?
He had a grant for the summer program for last year. And so I think he's taking that into effect, but
So it was 300
It was-
locally funded plus the grants made it 3.
is what he counted as
85 or
his
something.
375.
So it's 300 Valley, the cost to us was $300,000 though, it
It
wasn't
is
the cost
a
of
greater
Brattleboro.
cost.
Well,
Yeah.
I do believe that you had some surplus left at the end of that too, right?
Yeah.
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 So what was,
Yeah.
so what was the total spend on the program that we are running? Cause that's,
Do you have that number
I'm
in
assuming that we're
front of
not anticipating grant revenues.
No, I don't.
Is in the ask now?
So grant plus budget would.
Well, because there is no grant funding, is that what I'm
you?
getting?
There is no grant funding. All
So-
this funding you used up for
Yeah.
this summer.
But you're asking what did we spend all in?
Right, so if we're trying to base like, if we're gonna level, not level fund, but level programming, like what was the spend?
Right.
Okay. That was to date, but that is not the end. I know Lori had a spreadsheet that she put together, so hold on one second.
All
Can I
right.
ask a different question
Yeah.
while we're getting that number up?
Yep.
So I'm looking at the line that says, per Dana, we removed the funding for the Journey Away salary and benefits, then but retained the fund balance of 191 for future PDL. So what are we doing with that? How does that work? Are we just, that's just like the slush fund for future projects in case? Or, I mean, I'm just curious what, if there's like a plan for the money, or I don't understand what's happening with it.
You can ask Dana.
Oh, yeah. Dana? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, it's really just as simple as that. At our last meeting, the directive was clear to get us to the threshold. I know.
What the 191 is, right? That.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, by eliminating the position and holding the funding for a future restart, put Journey Away on hold for a year or two, see how everything shakes out, and then use the fund to get it rolling again.
Got it. And that fund balance came about because, I know the answer, but just.
That fund
Yeah,
balance,
it's been there for a while. I mean,
that's the fund that used to fund Journey East that had revenue from whether it was the original Freeman Foundation money or the
Yeah.
Chinese student tuitions or what have you. Money in, 31,000 money in, and then money out for the trips.
Okay, yeah, just a reminder.
Okay. And it was used this past year as well for the Journey Away trip, with some fundraising going in and some expenses coming out.
So is this part of the total fund balance that we talked about a little while ago, or is this in addition to our fund balance?
So it is, what you were talking about earlier was the general fund balance only.
The Journey East is a separate fund.
Yeah.
And it had 161, and this budget put 31,000 more into it.
Current this year.
The second question, is this fund restricted in any way?
Not to my knowledge, this fund was only restricted by the board and how they wanted to set it aside for Journey East or Journey Away.
So we don't have to use, the board could choose to use it for any purpose it chooses?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if we wanted to use fund balance to restore the $100,000 in PBL funding,
You could do that.
we could reduce that fund balance by 25,000 and get it there.
Yes. Yes, and it does look like it was 375,000, although when they took Jamaica out, it dropped down. Because I see that there was money set aside for Jamaica, Jamie, that was part of the 375, so it dropped down to 305. That's what this says. Didn't include JVS's 305.
That's for last year.
That's
Or this year.
For
current.
this year. For this year.
305 is the total spend.
That's what I see set aside without Jamaica, with an after-school program at Jamaica. But I see that originally it was 375.
So if we took out, and I'm just doing more, if we took out the funds to, expand into the high school, we just keep elementary and middle school, and we go down in the 4 days, I'm around 334.
Without any federal funds or grant
Without
funds.
anything, yeah, 330.
And that's with the middle school program, and that's also running a college
Yeah.
high school program in the summer.
Yeah.
So it depends on what the board is looking for. So with 334, you're losing a day of after school, but you're also funding opportunities for middle school students and potentially a high school program.
No, that's taking the high school out.
Oh, okay, just the
Yeah.
middle school program.
Yeah,
Okay.
just the middle school.
So that's what you're getting for 334, according to what he's looking at.
And that's not including grants and how much.
There's, right, it's not including any grants, which he has just recently applied for. Are you currently doing a middle school thing right now, Jamie?
In the school program,
Yeah. So you'd be continuing that program.
All right.
I would be inclined to stick with the 300 that's on here, based on those numbers and assuming that there's likely to be at least some grant funding, money coming from other places. Seems like that's fairly level funding. If there has to be a little bit of pinching to make that happen, I feel confident that there can be a little pinching. I feel comfortable with the 300.
Was that the budget or the actual spend? I think we talked about that if we were budgeted utilizing staff that were being paid, the budget was paying staff at a higher rate, so we were planning on hiring teachers, but we didn't end up, so the actual spend was less.
The original budget that he brought was at paying a $30 rate for teachers. I don't know if you've recalculated that piece because you've redone your budgets a couple times.
Yeah, so I mean,
Because for the most part, you're not paying teachers, right?
well, I mean, at our elementary schools, my main staff are not teachers, but you know, that could always change, and I don't want to shortchange us if we get, you know, if a teacher wants to come on, but I don't have the budget to cover that teacher coming on. So that's why, you know, I put everything at that teacher rate.
So they were,
So we're covered, but you know,
we're more likely over
realistically,
budgeted.
yeah, we're not gonna go, we wouldn't be going over this, yeah.
So can I just ask this question again?
Yeah.
To the month without padding, but without cuts, what is that actual number that you need to run what you've been running now minus the Friday afternoon? Like, let's say we want to keep, we're not worried about the number, but the programming, we want to keep we don't want to lose anything. But it sounds like Friday, and I will trust Friday we can live without.
Yeah,
Cutting
Friday
people?
we could live
What-
without, so
What does
that,
it cost to fund, but without extra, but also without cutting things other than Friday?
so that's the 334 that I said.
And that's not with extra padding for teachers, that's the
Well, that's,
staff we have?
no, that's with some padding, but like, I can't predict what staff's gonna leave and come on, you know what I mean?
But you have to.
It's just so that we can make like hard choices without like, what can, if we have to cut lots of things, but how can we be sure that we're at least funding like the programs, which are awesome and we need them, but without undercutting, but also without taking money from other things for padding? What would that number look like?
So,
Sorry.
I mean, rough estimate,
Let's say you split the difference on the salary.
I mean, rough estimate would be, you know, another 13,000 less, if we took that teacher
That's-
pay down, yeah.
It's gotta be more than that. It's all salary, I mean, it's all,
Well,
No,
the summer is different. I mean, there are a couple different variables. But this still doesn't have any collection of funds either, right?
yeah, this isn't
So,
any collection,
so
no
it,
grants, no any, yeah.
so we'll go on a limb just to try to wrap this part of the conversation up.
Yeah.
If we got to 3, if 3 is the number, and the budgeting for staff was tighter than more you know, conservative on that regard, then that plus maybe some grant money plus maybe some minimal charging might get us to still operate the way you're describing it, minus the Fridays. And minus the high school part.
Yeah.
It's like, we're in the ballpark, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, we don't want to spend hours quibbling over a couple bucks. If we're in the ballpark, could make that work. You guys aren't losing any substantial programming. You're going in with the amount that's built in with how it's already put in, and you can move on to the next thing, maybe.
Let's make it work. Sounds right.
I'm okay with that, which you're not gonna hear a lot of, but I'm okay with that. But I would, I am now really confused about where this money is being spent and how, so I would like an accounting of
He
how
has a
this-
budget, he does have a budget, and he,
Yeah, so if maybe at a future, we can get some clarification, because it's like we're budgeting, but we're not spending, and actually dollars and cents that are going out the door.
yeah, I think what comes, so there's no funds being changed hands for any programs right now, and I think one of the things we are encouraging is to charge minimal amounts also for next year, and summer camps potentially may generate some income, a reasonable income.
Well, so it could. So a couple things I want to warn us about, though, is that, the grant that I just applied for, if we do get that grant, we can't charge
Well,
for
how much is the
program.
grant for? I mean, the grant would likely offset what we would
Yeah.
gain in revenue.
Yeah,
anyway, so.
exactly. So there's that. The other thing is I did just run registrations for our new session, and I asked parents, if this became a pay program, would you still enroll your student, your child? For after school, I heard back 46% of our parents would not enroll their students, their child, if it became a paid program. So we would potentially lose 46 kids from doing after school. And I think that's a huge loss.
Percent or number of
Percent or
kids?
kids?
Percent.
So is there 100 kids in the,
We just registered 108, yeah.
so roughly?
Yeah, so, and these aren't necessarily kids there are some kids and families who don't need it, but there's also some families that really do need it, and it would be a huge disservice to them if we started to charge and we've lost that many students.
Okay, I think we can all, can we agree on 300 and move on, and let's get some grant money, hopefully put it on that and get an accounting of the spend. Yeah, fair, can we move on? Go ahead, Drew.
So it's interesting to me that, and kind of go back to where Joe was saying, we're forcing, I guess, the taxpayers to pay for a program that it sounds like half the people that are participating in it aren't willing to put anything towards. So I know we're not gonna have that answer tonight, but I think we need to do some more research these budgets are not gonna get easier. So if the parents are only doing it because it's there, it's free, it's convenient, but they're not willing to contribute, then why are we asking fixed income seniors to contribute to that program? So they're I should say asking, we're telling them they're going to, because they didn't get a detailed option, they don't get to pick after school or not after school. So I think as we go forward, I've got more questions now than I have answers.
And I understand what you're saying, but I also want to be careful that we're not discounting people who said they wouldn't sign their kids up because they can't. And those are the people we want to make sure are served.
Yeah, it's true, there's a difference between camp.
And you can't parse
Yeah.
why someone is giving the service.
Fair.
There was, they didn't ask two questions.
Yeah,
Totally.
fair question. Okay. Anything else that we want to discuss? Just that last all over.
The weeds.
Just that last.
Wait, what did we say about the
300.
Wardsboro?
Sorry, we got that.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the weeds.
Oh, that's the, okay.
Just that
Okay.
last one.
That's my weeds.
Okay, thank you.
So if we, I mean, it doesn't seem fair to me that we wouldn't continue if we're not gonna offer all the grades at Jamaica to pay for the kids that we are paying for now. But is there a way to do it so that we can't, like, but I don't wanna open the door to 20 more kids like, hey, well, now that this isn't gonna happen, I wanna go here too. Cause unless they moved, they didn't fit into the category. So we had the protection of the statute of like geographically convenient or whatever. Do we still have that?
That statute hasn't changed.
But that wasn't part of the emergency closure part?
No, that statute existed previously. That's just a separate thing.
Okay.
So, because and then the logic is, the other example you could use, you get a family that lives up on Putney Mountain, on the Putney side maybe of the line, but maybe on this, I don't know where the line is, but let's say it's on this side of where the road closes.
Uh-huh.
They have to drive all the way around to get to Putney School.
Yeah.
That's why the law is there.
Oh, right.
So I think in this case, I think I just counted this 1, 4.
I think there were 4
3,
children,
4.
right? 4 students.
There's 4 that you accepted on a 1-year basis, and there was a 5th that you denied for a permanent request, I guess was the way to word that. But yeah, you're currently paying for 4. But that they would have to reapply because they only grant them 1 year.
Right.
Of course, I could advise them on that if you were choosing to do so. But yeah, I think that's.
But eventually that should go away.
So if you're talking about the governor's proposal,
The 4.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of details to that plan that is yet to be known. So,
Are you thinking, no, the 4-year-olds would age out? The four
Oh, no,
Or
no,
the 4
four
students that
students
are tuitioned
would
would
eventually age out.
age to here.
right.
But
They were
Age
affected
into-
by the school closure last year.
But you
Yeah.
could have potential new pre-K
Well, you might have a
students.
current 4-year-old at JVS who's going into kindergarten who might request it for next year.
Right, so it doesn't necessarily work that way.
Yeah.
But it has to be a geographical issue.
They would have to demonstrate to you that it is more conveniently furnished. Their education is more conveniently furnished at Wardsboro Elementary School than in Townsend. Correct.
Well, so really, we don't have a choice. It's not like we have to decide if we're going to do this or not. They can come here, make their case, and we have to decide on a case-by-case basis.
You do, and if you say no, they can appeal to the Secretary of Ed, who can overrule you
Got it.
and force you to pay it anyways. So that's the flip side of that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And not everyone is going to qualify, right? So you have some folks that live on 30,
Yeah.
on this side of 100, who are clearly going to be closer to Townsend, right? And
Right.
you have some folks who are on South Hill. I always get the
South Hill.
South Hill, who are like in the backyard of
Yeah.
the Wardsboro School, who can walk through the woods. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Their parents are on the Wardsboro Fire Department, not the Jamaica.
correct. Yeah. I mean, they face that direction. So it's like, but a family out in Rawsonville it might be equidistant, right? Because it's long both places. So like that way, they might not be able to prove that it's more convenient.
Well, right. But so what I'm getting at now is this isn't really a budget discussion so much as it's statute. If they come to us, we have to.
You have to consider it.
We have to
You
consider
don't have
it.
to grant
and if
it.
it's geographically, if they're 9 miles from the Wardsboro school and 30 miles from the Townsend school,
Yeah.
are we really gonna?
The schools aren't that far apart, nobody could be 30
Well,
miles.
we had pretty far apart last time I remember. Like, it's 20 miles to get here and it's 4 miles to get here, and I have to drive past Wardsboro to get here.
I am uncomfortable with maintaining our current status of let's just wing it when they walk in the door. I would feel significantly more comfortable agreeing to continue that if we had, as a board, previously discussed what that means and how much more convenient. I just feel like it's Pandora's box and a very, it's a very narrow line to walk without having it's out there, everyone can read it. If you fall into these specific things, then that's how much closer is good. I just,
So it might be a moot point because the existing tuition has actually been budgeted in as an expense. So it's already built into this. So whether you're taking it out as an expense, you
Right.
could choose to do that and reduce your
It's probably a
overall
little
budget.
under budgeted, depending on how many you have, but it's in there already.
There's a placeholder in there anyways.
Exactly,
How many-
57,000 is what's in there, and you could be looking at 70,
I'm sorry, how many kids do you?
Four.
Or
Four is-
placeholder for 4,
yes.
nothing for the budget now.
I think the tuition went up a little bit for this coming year, so you're probably under budgeted 4, you're probably more budgeted for 3 this right now.
So you just flat budgeted it to
Yes,
last
I
year.
did.
Okay, so potential. Alright, so, I mean, we have to at least consider it, right?
You'd be obligated to consider the request, yes. And you have money already in the bucket in the event that you said yes, or if the state made you, because if they make you, you're still paying for it. And you do still keep the ADM count.
Yeah.
So there's that. It's not like you're paying out tuition with no revenue to back it. You're still, you know.
Yeah.
But-
Okay.
See, wasn't that hard after all?
Consider it's, at least we cut the weeds.
Yeah.
The weed whacker up.
I think we take it out of the budget.
I
think we take
gotta
it
find the
out?
bright side of everything.
I think we take it out of the budget, and, because parents haven't even requested, so. I think we remove it from the budget, and if we do get requests, and we do approve those requests, what is the worst thing that happens?
Your deficit
We
spending.
deficit spend, and we have a $1.7 million surplus. So why ask the taxpayer for money we don't know that we need? At this point, when
Yeah, the only thing I will, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all, the only thing I will say is that I feel a level of obligation as the educator to inform the families that they will need to renew their request. Because otherwise it feels like the kids are in this place and then we're gonna just yank them. They don't even know they're getting yanked. You know what I mean? They might, or they might not, depending on how much
Yeah, no.
they're paying attention. So I would be sharing that information with them. So it's likely, unless they happen to be a 6th grader, or actually a 5th grader, because they would have gone there for 6th grade anyways, that they would be asking anyways, just because of the consistency of the placement, right?
or maybe they're having a horrible experience.
Maybe,
in school.
yeah, maybe they want out. Yeah,
What's the deadline for those requests?
there isn't one. The statute doesn't provide one.
Maybe we can.
So it could be in the summer that they ask, yeah. Which is maybe another reason to take it out, right?
I just, again, having a huge surplus, and we've demonstrated, I would say, fiscal responsibility over the last few years, ending up with almost the surplus almost every year. Do we need to ask the taxpayers for this money? And if we don't, then we shouldn't. And if we do get these tuition requests, then we can make that decision.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, just take it out of it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Maybe if we consider and say, yes, we're spending money anyway. Yeah, just this way it just gets us that much closer to below the average spending threshold quicker. Okay.
Right, I love fund balance. I do fund balance if we need to.
Kate, you furrow the brow. You disagree?
I think it's complicated, but
You
go
sure?
ahead, thank you all.
All right. Okay. Anything else we want to discuss on that? And if not, just wanted to get a check with IEC. Kind of where,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
give her some time, but is there anything else that we want to consider? While you're figuring that out, I just wanted to ask about the 75,000 that you mentioned for meals to Forgeborough.
The vended meals.
Yeah, is that built into?
That is in our
It is, okay.
budget, yes.
Got it.
I just thought of something, does it make sense or not to, currently that fund balance for Journey Away, the 191, if we're eliminating that program, does it make sense to officially move that fund to somewhere else, since it's weird to have a Journey Away fund but no Journey Away program, or do we just let it sit there until we decide what to do with it? I just don't know what the right way to handle that is. I don't think just sort of a moving money question. I don't know that it's not gonna affect the budget, but.
I mean, I think if you want to move from funds, you'd probably have to do that with voters, right, as an article?
No.
Not necessarily,
If
maybe?
there's no program.
Well, so this is the other piece of this. Keep in mind, I remember Dana's conversation, who's got his hand up, maybe I'll just let him talk, but I think because of the blending with the Journey Away and the PBL, that having it be that sort of that savings account, if you will, for PBL, might be
Sure.
the way you want to direct it, and then it does,
Yeah.
it just sits there until the rainy day for
That's sort of
PBL.
why I brought it up, just because if it's called Journey Away, we
Or
can't
PBL.
really use it for PBL unless we change what that fund is,
As
right?
long as the board votes an
Okay.
agreement, I think you're all set. I don't believe
Okay.
you've ever asked the voters to set aside that fund for Journeys. I believe it was a board directed thing.
Okay.
Okay, so we can change the name of it with a board decision. with
I just
minutes.
was afraid, I didn't wanna tie our hands, and I just wanna make sure we're doing the right thing with it.
Yeah, and I think we already demonstrated that we could take 25,000 out of it for the
Yeah.
PBL anyway, so, yeah.
Do you want to hear from Dana?
Yeah,
Yes.
sure, good,
No, I just wanted to clarify, our intention was not to permanently eliminate the program, but that we were going to put it on pause for a year or two and really develop our staff skills around intensives and expeditions and see if we can build up capacity. The reality is that with what's going on in the state and budget, it's like we're going to have a lean program for sure, but our intention is not to never come back to the initiative. It's definitely the direction we want to continue to grow in, but the current state of things, it's what we ended up doing.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Yeah, it probably just makes sense to keep it earmarked for that for the future. Not that it's only for that. But, yeah, the numbers, you got the magic
Yeah,
number,
so I
right?
just want to go over, we've added back in pre-K program. We've added back in the BDCC full and VEMSA full, and we've added the 25,000 in for the PBL.
Yep. Request an increase from 75 to 100.
Yes, and so with those added and then taking out the tuition set aside, to get to the threshold, we would use 170,000 of your fund balance. If you want to go beyond that and help further the tax reduction for Jamaica specifically, we can add to that, but you need 170,000 at this point to get to the threshold.
Sorry, one question. So 120 is the 3-year-olds.
Yep.
22.5 for events with BDCC.
And 25,000 for
PBL.
PBL. Mhm.
So we're at 147.5.
Plus you took out
But
the tuition
57,000 came
expense.
out for
So
tuition.
reducing that gets us down to 90. Right? Because if you're at 147.5 and you subtract 57.
Yep. So I have your
Like 90.
expenditures at 14,792 and 113. $14,792,113 I have, yes. And so the offsetting revenue to get that to what the net spending needs to be would be $1,264,726. And to get to that offsetting revenue number, we use 170,000 of fund balance.
Okay.
I
Question?
have one
Looking-
question. You had mentioned earlier that we had a potential surplus from this year. What was that again?
That is, I'm conservatively 400,000.
So really we're talking about spending 170 out of fund balance, but we've saved a big chunk
There's
of
a
that.
lot, and that's why if you wanna reduce more of the tax implications, this would be the place to do it.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. I'm not ever comfortable with like landing on the excess spending threshold. Doesn't make any sense to me. there's more that could change, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
a fraction
The
could
yield can
change
change,
you by
yep. Mhm.
25, 50,000.
Real change.
Yes.
Right.
That was good.
It's
But
going-
that could be how that could be the choice of the governor as how it's gonna help your taxes. He could be,
Could be good change, yeah.
Right,
I was
right.
gonna say lowering it, but it actually needs to go up too.
But I'd say at the very least, we want to be at least marginally below the
Yeah.
excess spending threshold. So, I mean, if it's 170 to get us there, 200 would be,
We
maybe
did 200.
safely put us below.
And let me pause you there and just tell you the expenditure number. She gave you the 14.7 is actually, so before you had a $86,000 increase over last year. This one is 110.5 increase over last year for 0.75%.
Increase.
0.75%. So that's where you're at right now. With fund balance is unrelated, obviously, but that's where you're at for expenditures.
And what is our long-term weighted ADM year over year?
Your long-term weighted ADM is 840 students right now.
Versus last year?
Oh, versus last year.
Sorry, if you don't have it immediately.
It's on a different,
Yeah.
Per pupil, your per pupil cost will probably have gone up because your overall long-term ADM went down, even if this was level funded.
Yeah.
your per
Which
pupil
only makes
cost
sense. Right.
for last year was 16,391 per pupil. Right now, with the fund balance of 170,000 being used, you're at 16,093. So you're actually reducing it by almost 300, which is showing a 0.02 percent variance. So you're negative 0.02 from last year. So that'll look good on your articles.
Sure
warning.
will, yeah, okay.
Can we add some language to the articles that this is not per kid?
Not
Like,
real
this is so confusing.
This is the,
Because
It
it's
is.
like, we said this per pupil number out, and it sounds like it's costing us $16,000 per kid to educate them. And because that
language
just makes
is
sense.
prescribed.
the language is prescribed by law.
Yeah.
Can we put like an asterisk? Like, I was just-
In addition to this, we would like you to know.
Because when I say,
We would like you to
when
talk
we say
to
the
Drew.
per pupil spending is $16,000, any person that's not sitting around this table thinks that per pupil is per kid, not like the
Long-term weighted pupil, right?
make-believe kids.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
So, I don't know, like, I would love to see if we could have some sort of language for the public so they know that.
Or like a sheet that comes in front that's
Actually
definitions.
In the annual report, we could describe what a long-term weighted ADM is. We could even maybe use some of the charts that Heidi had educated you with and maybe even have a little bit of a half a page on that before we get to this.
They're getting negative kids, you're lose people.
I know.
Leave the
Some of these kids are just negative though.
Yeah, that sounds like informational material.
Not at Newbrook, they're all
So,
positive.
Are we adding a little extra?
Right, that's what I was gonna say. Can we have a consensus on what you wanna add
Yeah,
for fund balance over and above the 170?
that's,
So you were suggesting 200? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
just
Do you want to say what 200 would do to the town's tax rates, just to have
Yeah.
that number floating
Sure.
around
Yep.
in the ether here?
It won't change Jamaica so much.
So Jamaica's tax rate would be 6.5% over this current year for 147 per house site value. Newfane is 2.68% up at 55 per 100,000 house sites. Townsend is 1.05% up at a $21 increase over 100,000 house site value. Brookline is negative 9.57. Wyndham is negative 13.43%. So they're reducing their taxes. If we wanted to try to get, if you want to give me a goal for what you'd like Jamaica's tax rate to be, I can. Do you want me to try to get a 5% increase? What are you thinking? Drew, I'm looking at you,
I am
Jamaica
super
resident.
confident that tomorrow night, the SU board is gonna find some savings.
Definitely not going to do that tomorrow.
Definitely
And-
Not tomorrow.
and,
Maybe Thursday.
or Thursday night, Thursday. I would have been
Better
here
not
all
find
by
anything
myself.
tomorrow.
And we would have missed you terribly on Thursday.
You just have to come twice and then you'd have been mad.
So I am
He got
really,
his own
really confident, after spending my entire weekend pouring through more documents and looking at numbers, that there's some savings that we're gonna realize. And so I think if we do the 200 plus the SU savings, that I think we can, that would be,
Again, just remember, it's not dollar for dollar.
it is not, it's
Okay.
51%.
It's
no,
lower.
64.
51%.
64 is what we gave you during the budget meeting.
MTSS one is 51%,
Right.
which is the biggest budget. So
They all get
it's
put
51.
together. The
We
allocation.
gotta find some more,
You get 2 nights.
no problem. Challenge accepted.
He doesn't say.
All right,
Okay, so
so
we're leaving it at 200.
200? going
Well,
once.
we can always move it, right? No, I'm like, we have till February 10th. We're not
You have until
adopting a
February
budget.
10th.
Sure.
So we can always say like, oh geez, something happened.
Sure.
Which at this point
Let's
is
make
your,
it 250,
I will
300,
bring
whatever
back
we need. Yeah.
the information based on what we've talked about, and you're not approving it tonight, so
Yeah,
you
we're
can
not
make
carving
changes and I
anything,
can
so
make
it's
some
200.
changes on the fly if needed, yes.
In
Yep.
case we don't find that.
Souls.
Sold.
Sold.
All right.
Dana, I don't want to mess this up.
I am the devil's advocate.
so,
I'm the devil.
so Al, you, at this point, you don't have another meeting scheduled. So February 10th is your first and only and last opportunity to do anything with this and the articles at this point. So I just wanted folks to be reminded of that.
No
I
pressure.
don't think we have any major tweaks to the articles. I don't
If
think
you feel like what you're at for this, from expenditure budget is where you're at, then
Yeah, I mean, aside from Thursday, I mean, is everybody comfortable with where we're at?
Yeah.
Then I don't see why we would be early February.
so I'll bring
Still
back.
get some
February
time.
is Saturday, just so you know.
That's true. So
Just saying.
Crazy to think
So,
about, but
we'll
it's
bring
true.
back for that meeting the edited warning with a number plugged in from this budget,
Yeah.
even though we haven't adopted it officially yet.
Yeah.
But if you did it at that point, then those wouldn't change and you have that as the draft.
And I would, as you said earlier, I would encourage anybody to look at the articles. If you see anything.
Yeah.
Anything
Please.
that's off.
Shoot me an email.
Let's-
Yeah.
Okay. I think that gets us to executive session.
Can we,
Go ahead.
can we go out of order and just ask if there's any public comment before we do
Oh,
that?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I know,
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that at the
No,
beginning.
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Public.
We do have some public here. Yeah, so if anybody wants to speak, we can certainly give you a few minutes.
Not increasing taxes.
We're trying.
Increase in taxes. I'm sorry, can you state your name and where you're
Oh,
from?
I'm sorry. My name is Christina Healy,
And you're from?
Jamaica.
Okay. I was gonna guess.
But he's-
You're not from Brooklyn, I know that. Cause you're already there.
I descend from Cork City in Ireland.
Oh,
there you
wow.
go. That's cool.
Yeah.
Anybody else out here?
I'm Madeline Helser. I'd just like to say I appreciate keeping in the 3-year-old program. It's so important developmentally to the kids and to the community that needs it. I'm the librarian over there, and I'm working with the preschool, and it's just really encouraging to see how much those kids have grown from before when I knew them before they went into preschool, and I've just seen them like for 3 sessions, and it's just, the gains are incredible. So thank you so much for keeping that in and going.
Thank you. Anybody else? Did I miss anybody out there? See no hands. Last chance for public comment. Once, going twice, okay.
Got one more thing for you.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, I've watched the news and we still have school violence happening. And I know that we made a board-directed investment in updating and utilizing our school crisis stuff last year. Is there any way we can get that on the agenda for a report as to how that funding that we directed was spent and where we're at in developing. We don't need to like go over the specific plan, but I know that we had voted specifically to allocate funds for
Safety.
school safety. I don't remember what we called it, but there's
Yeah.
the school safety.
Called it school safety.
So, like I said,
Yeah.
in case you haven't opened the news, like there seems to be more school violence popping up all over the place. Most recently, with major threats in Brattleboro, I'm hopeful that we've been able to fully implement all of the updates and security locks and stuff
Thank you, Rick.
we asked for.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Peter Broussard.
Peter. You're on mute.
Are you looking for me?
Peter
Peter.
Broussard has a hand up.
Sorry about that. Oh, good. Had to get clear of the room. I was just wondering if another board member there can make sure to get all the members of the public's name and send it to Sue, who are in person there. Usually I would do it, but I'm not able to be there today.
Lindsay looks like she just volunteered. She put her thumb up. I'm just saying, she put her thumb up,
I got a
Peter.
pen, you guys.
I'm here for you, Peter. I got you.
Very good. Thank you, Lindsay and Bob.
Thanks, Peter.
Mostly
Appreciate
I
Lindsay.
got you, Peter. Only because I had to.
All right. I guess we'll give the folks a moment to pass around the sheet, but after that, we'll go into executive
So
session.
for the executive session, so obviously Scotty, who's running the Zoom, is looking to leave. We can make BCTV the host, and then you can end it after. Does that work for you?
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you, sir.
You just hand me the HDMI and plug into my adapter.
Yep, got it right here. Perfect.
All right. All right. I will make a motion. I motion to move into executive session for the purpose of evaluating the superintendent under 1 DSA 313A3.
I'll second the right.
Yeah.
Make him the host.
I did any discussion?
Nope. Just leave it.
None?
I just
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Good, folks.
Thank you, sir.
We have come out of executive session and we are currently live. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do we still have Peter out there?
Peter's gone.
Aye.
Thank you, Peter. You made it official. All right.
You weren't official without Peter?
No.
Wow.
Definitely not.
All right. Thanks, everybody.